Around the same time that her lover was dragging Kevin Whitaker's lifeless body into a ditch, Tony Tucker's teenage mistress, Donna Garwood, was desperately trying to get hold of her man to give him a special birthday treat. The pair had met more than a year earlier at Raquel's nightclub in Basildon, where Tucker controlled the door staff. The pair began a passionate affair, and Garwood quickly became besotted, telling friends that she had met the man she wanted to spend the rest of her life with. "In my eyes, Tony wasn't the drug baron or villain he was made out to be," she says. "He used to say, 'They don't know me, so who are they to judge?' When we met, we just clicked and that was it. He was very romantic and showed me what life was all about. We used to go riding together and were always laughing. He was a little kid at heart, really." Though Tucker had no intention of leaving his live-in lover Anna Whitehead, he had become equally infatuated with wild child Garwood. He set her up in Pat Tate's old flat in Swansted, and the two spent as much time together as they possibly could. At first, he tried to keep her well away from his business dealings, rarely discussing anything when she was within earshot. But it soon became impossible. It wasn't long before the teenager knew most of Tucker's business. Despite her tender years, Garwood took easily to the role of mistress. She got used to not having her lover on tap whenever she wanted, to meetings being cancelled at the last minute and unexpected. She also got used to never ever calling him at home, to ensure that Anna never found out about them. Instead, if Tucker's mobile wasn't on, Garwood would call one of the other members of the team, all of whom knew about her, and ask them to pass the message on. Although Tony Tucker, Pat Tate and Craig Rolfe were the main driving force behind the firm, as their gang had come to be known, there were a handful of honorary members who were allowed to mingle in their social circle and became privy to many of their activities. One of these was Stephen Ellis, given the nickname Nipper because at just 5 feet 5 inches, he was dwarfed by his companions. Ellis was the type of bloke who gave the business of crime a bad name, having picked up a handful of convictions for silly little robberies. His greatest moment came after he broke into a dry cleaning shop and stole a whole £100 from the till. He was caught but escaped from Southend Court, dislocating the shoulder of a policeman on the way, and went on the run. A few weeks later, he was caught red-handed as he tried breaking into a home improvement centre. Crime was obviously not Ellis's strong point, but he had some useful contacts, was funny and good company, and the trio warmed to him. Pretty soon he had become part of the furniture and was tagging along everywhere the firm went. As the morning of Tucker's birthday, the 17th of November, became afternoon and then early evening, Garwood gave up leaving messages on his mobile and called Ellis to try and find out where he was. Ellis, coked out of his head and in a playful mood, couldn't help but make a joke of it. Tucker, probably giving his old lady one. Yeah, probably shagging her up the arse right about now. It wasn't what Garwood wanted to hear. When she eventually spoke to Tucker, she told him how much Ellis had pissed her off. By his own admission, Ellis knows the remark was well out of order, but then so was Tucker's response. Tony thought he was the big hard man, the one who everyone respected, and I'd embarrassed him. The most he should have done was come over and give me a slap, tell me not to talk to his bird like that, to show her a bit of respect, Ellis said later. Instead, Tucker, with Rolfe in tow, went on the warpath. Still buzzing after the murder of Whitaker, the pair turned up at Ellis's house, where Tucker stuck a loaded pistol in his temple and threatened to kill him there and then. As Ellis cowered in the corner mumbling apologies, Tucker and Rolfe took their anger out on his house, smashing up everything apart from the television and video, which they decided to take for themselves. Finally, as a final act of savagery, both men defecated on the living room floor and spread their shit over the walls before driving off laughing hysterically. Pat Tate had missed out on the first round of festivities, but once Tucker told him what Ellis had done, he was keen to join in. Tate had always suspected that Ellis had grassed him up over an incident where the firm had smashed up a grocer's shop and beaten the owner when he tried to break up a friendly food fight a couple of weeks earlier. This was his chance to get his revenge. Ellis was not to be found at his own place, so Tate and Tucker decided to drop in on his parents. They threatened his father and told him they planned to cut off the fingers of Ellis's 15-year-old sister one at a time until he was man enough to face them. "There was no way I was going to take that," says Ellis. "I can look after myself, but when they started threatening my family, that was going too far. I went out and got myself a gun and a bulletproof jacket and then I went after them. I was coked up and whizzed up and I had it in my mind I was going to kill them. I wasn't scared. The thing about Tucker is that at the end of the day he's just a bully. I've seen him shit himself when a gun's pulled on him. I've seen him get beaten up. I've heard him say, no more, please. I might only be small, but I knew I had to stand up to them. And I knew I had to get all three of them. If I only killed one or two, then the others would come after me. It had to be all three of them. The exact details of what happened next vary according to whose version of events you deem most reliable. What remains certain, however, is that in the early afternoon of Sunday the 20th of November, Tucker and Rolfe made a complaint to the police that as they were on their way to a Dagenham snooker hall that Tucker had booked a birthday party for, they had been confronted in the street by a screaming Stephen Ellis who brandished what looked like a sawn-off shotgun at them. With no weapons of their own, they had no choice but to make a humiliating retreat. An hour or so later, while Pat Tate was in the bath at his £120,000 Basildon bungalow also getting ready for Tucker's party, a brick came crashing through the window. He peered out to see what was going on and immediately saw a handgun being pointed directly at his head. As the gun was fired, he instinctively threw his right arm up in front of his face to protect himself. The bullet entered at his wrist and travelled up to his elbow, shattering bone and tearing out lumps of tissue as it went. The would-be assassin stepped forward to fire again and finish the job, but his gun jammed, so he turned and fled. Later, as he was carted off to hospital, Tate was asked by a friend if he could identify the gunman. Tate nodded and claimed, "It was Nipper Ellis, Stephen Ellis, and he's going to die." News of the shooting spread like wildfire. Ellis's standing among the Essex underworld was soaring rapidly, while Tate and Tucker were fast losing respect. At Tucker's birthday party later that day, only around 20 people turned up. The previous year there had been more than 200. The rest fearing a massive gun battle might erupt in its midst. Darren Nichols states, "I heard on the grapevine that Pat Tate had been released from prison and that someone had shot him. So remembering what a great bloke he was, I rang Mick Steele to see if he had a number for him. I finally got through to Pat on his mobile. He had taken it with him into the hospital. He seemed really pleased to hear from me. I arranged to go and visit him the next day, taking 4 bottles of lager as a kind of well done for not being dead present. Just before I left, I happened to mention to a friend, who also knew Pat but not that well, that I was going to see him. He told me to say hello, and remembering Pat's obsession with bodybuilding, asked if he could find out if he had any steroids for sale. I was really looking forward to seeing Pat again, but within about 30 seconds of getting to the hospital, I realised he just wasn't the same bloke I used to know. He was really arrogant, noisy and right off his face on something or other. He then started going on about how he was going to set up Nipper Ellis and kill him, and how people were smuggling drugs into the hospital for him so he didn't have to go without. It's like a party in here every night. You should come by again later. My mate Tony will be here. I'd love the two of you to meet." When I mentioned a mutual friend who wanted the steroids, Pat suddenly got really excited. "How much does he need? You tell him as much as he wants. I can get the lot for him. Truckloads. Does he just want steroids? I can get the lot. Ease, Whiz, Charlie, Puff. You tell him no matter what he needs, I can get it. I'm the man." Maybe it was the drugs he had taken. Maybe it's because I hadn't seen him for such a long time that I'd forgotten what he was really like. Or maybe getting shot in the arm had affected his brain. Either way, the bloke in the hospital wasn't the Pat Tate I remembered. He'd gone from nice bloke to total wanker. Later that same day, Mick rang me up and asked me to go over to his bungalow in Angers Green, as he had some work for me. I'd spoken to Mick a couple of times since I'd been released, and I'd bumped into him once, but this was the first time we'd had a chance to catch up properly. We were standing in his kitchen, and he'd asked if I'd seen Pat and what I'd thought of him. "Listen, Mick," I said. "No offence, right? Because I know this guy's your friend and all that, but I really didn't like him. He wasn't the same Pat I met at Hollesley Bay. He seems to have turned into a bit of an arsehole." Mick just laughed, then asked if I'd mind going over to his mum's house in Point Clear to have a look at her central heating which was playing up. Once we got there, it was obvious the whole lot needed to be replaced, and Mick paid me to do the work. We spent a lot of time chatting over the next few days, and in some stupid way, it was a bit like being back inside. I felt like we were becoming mates, all over again. No one had seen or heard of Nipper Ellis since a couple of days after the shooting. The firm, desperate not to lose face, were desperate to lure Ellis out in the open. They changed tactics. Rather than threats, Tucker left sympathetic messages on Ellis's answer machine, saying that there was no point in any more violence, that Pat wanted him to come and visit him at Basildon Hospital so that the whole thing could get sorted out. Even Ellis wasn't stupid enough to fall for that one, and stayed well away. A couple of days later, a nurse making up Tate's bed while he was in surgery found a handgun hidden under the mattress. Tucker had smuggled it in, and the plan was that the second Nipper Ellis walked through the door, Tate would execute him and then the gun would immediately be smuggled out and destroyed. But it wasn't to be. After the gun was found, Tate had his parole revoked and he was sent back to finish his sentence. Furious that he had ended up going back to prison because he'd been the victim of a serious crime and was trying to protect himself.